It doesn't make sense, does it? How, even now, after everything, there's still this quiet sense inside you that you were made for more. Not louder, not busier, just deeper. Even with the ache, even in the silence, even though you walked away or were pushed away from what once felt like purpose, you still feel called. Don't you? You've tried to explain it away, tried to forget, tried to numb it with movement, with reasons, with regrets. But it stays. Like a thread you never cut, like a page in your story that refuses to close. And if you're honest, you don't know whether to follow it or bury it. Because how do you trust a calling when all you feel is disqualified? How do you return when your hands are still trembling with shame? How do you believe when the path is overgrown with memories you'd rather forget? But maybe that's the very place where healing begins. Not in forgetting, not in pretending you never fell, but in hearing this whisper again. You're not finished. You're not forgotten. You're not disqualified. You are still called. And in this moment, without striving, without forcing, you are invited to stay. Not to prove anything, but to remember something. There's a path back. There's a presence near. There's a whisper rising again. Stay for a while. You don't have to figure it all out. Just stay. This is where healing begins. Regret is a slow poison. Not loud, not obvious, but steady. It seeps in through the cracks of memory, replaying moments you can't undo, sentences you wish you could unsay, paths you wish you hadn't taken. And at first it feels like repentance. Like maybe if you sit with it long enough, God will see how sorry you are. But that's not God's voice. That's not conviction. That's shame dressed up in holiness. And the enemy knows exactly how to use it. He doesn't need you to fall again. He just needs you to believe you shouldn't get back up. To keep circling the same memory until you start believing you're no longer usable. That your mistakes rewrote your destiny. That your failure was final. But heaven never labeled you with your lowest moment. God never revoked the calling. Not when you stumbled. Not when you left. Not even when you stopped believing in yourself. So if you feel that ache, if something inside you still stirs when you hear the word calling, that's not delusion. That's a spark, a divine memory, a trace of truth the enemy couldn't erase. You are not too far gone, not too late, not too broken, not too disqualified. You are still held, still seen, still invited back into the story. And this time, you'll walk with more humility, more compassion, more clarity than before. If that quiet stirring speaks to you, if it feels like this message reached you at the exact moment you needed it, maybe it's not just a video, maybe it's a whisper meant for you. Stay with us here at Calm, Called, so when the next whisper comes, you'll be ready to receive it. Subscribe now, and let's walk this healing together. You didn't plan to drift. Maybe it happened slowly, like fog creeping in over still waters. Maybe it was sudden, like a slammed door after too many silent prayers. Either way, one day you looked around and realized you were far. Far from the peace you used to know. Far from the voice that once guided your steps. Far from the version of you that still believed. And part of you assumed God moved on without you, found someone else, someone more consistent, more faithful, less fractured. But that's not how mercy works. That's not how the shepherd sees his own. When you stepped away, he still saw you. When you stopped praying, He kept whispering. When your silence grew louder than your hope, his gaze never left. You were never abandoned to the wilderness. You were accompanied through it. Even now, there's evidence. The fact that you're here, still listening, still wondering, still hoping, even if barely as a trace of grace. You're not being invited to start over. You're being called to return. Not to where you were, but to where he is right now. This is the quiet turning point. Not a breakthrough with thunder, but a subtle shift in direction. A soul realignment, a sacred return. He's still here, and so are you. Let that be enough for now. Let that truth breathe for a moment. You're not unseen. You're not unwanted. You're not disqualified. You're already on the path back. There's a quiet lie we carry, that what's broken should be buried. That if a moment, a season, or a version of ourselves failed, it must be erased. Start fresh, forget the past, rewrite the story as if that chapter never happened. But God doesn't edit with erasers. He redeems with light. He writes new endings not by deleting the pain, but by weaving it into the purpose. Even this wound, this season of silence, this tangled grief, none of it is wasted. Do you remember the story of the prodigal son? Most do, but there's a detail we often overlook. When the son returned, he didn't come back with answers. He came back in pieces. And still, the father ran. No delay, no interrogation, no punishment. Just open arms and restored identity. That's the heart of the Father, not to discard the ones who wandered, but to reclothe them in belonging. The failure you fear might actually be the fertilizer. The very soil where compassion takes root, where humility grows strong, where wisdom ripens quietly, away from the noise. You didn't waste those years. You gained something the surface can't see: depth, texture, empathy, the kind of authority that comes only from surviving your own storm. And if you let him, God will use every piece of it. That moment you wish never happened, it becomes part of your healing ministry. That season where you walked in circles, it taught you how to guide others who feel lost. That ache that still lingers, it opens your ears to pain others can't put into words. So don't silence this chapter. Don't hide the scar. Hold it up to the light, not as a symbol of shame, but as proof of what grace can carry through. Nothing in God's hands is wasted, and that includes you. Even now, especially now, he's writing it all into the story. Not in spite of your past, but through it. Delay is a strange kind of wilderness. It's not a full stop, but it feels like one. The plans stall, the dreams grow quiet, the prayers stretch thin with time. And somewhere in the waiting, you start to wonder if maybe you missed it. Maybe God changed his mind. Maybe you were too slow, too broken, too distracted. Maybe what was once possible is now past tense. But what if this delay isn't a dismissal, but a classroom? What if the detour was the divine route all along? David was anointed long before he was appointed. Joseph dreamed long before he ruled. Even Jesus waited 30 years before the first miracle. Delay doesn't mean disqualification. It means development. It's not punishment. It's preparation. You weren't being sidelined. You were being deepened. Tested in the quiet, strengthened in the unseen, taught how to trust in the absence of applause. Because when you lead again, and you will, it won't be with ego. It will be with empathy, with eyes that can see pain, with ears that can hear silence. And here's the holy irony. Healing isn't what happens after the waiting. It is the waiting. The long days when you kept showing up even in silence. The prayers you whispered with no reply. The choices you made with trembling hope. That was the work. Every quiet yes became muscle. Every surrendered day became oil in your lamp. And now you carry a weight that isn't heavy, but holy. So if it still feels slow, if you're wondering when the door opens again, breathe. This isn't the end. It's the threshold. The delay didn't stop your calling. It shaped it. And now, it's almost time. Can you feel it? That faint stirring again? Not urgency, not pressure, just readiness. Like something inside you has been practicing in the quiet, and now it's starting to rise. The delay was not in vain. It was training. And now, the reactivation begins. When something breaks, our instinct is to throw it out. We assume the damage makes it unusable. We assume the plan must now be rewritten from scratch. But heaven is not that fragile, and your calling was never that dependent on perfection. You may have lost your confidence, but God never lost the blueprint. What He designed in love, He doesn't abandon in disappointment. He doesn't tear up the plan because you took a detour. He doesn't remove your purpose because of a wrong turn. He just redraws the path. He recalibrates, not out of frustration, but out of mercy. You thought the delay disqualified you, but it deepened you. You thought the failure canceled your assignment, but it only clarified it. Some of the most anointed voices in history were shaped in seasons of silence, not on stages but in caves, not in favor but in obscurity. And yet, the blueprint never changed. Think of Moses. He ran, he doubted, he stuttered, but the calling remained. God didn't say, "Well, since you've struggled, I'll find someone else." No. He said, "I will be with you." That's what the blueprint always included. Not just the mission, but the presence that would carry it. You might not know how to begin again, but you don't have to start from scratch. You're not being asked to rebuild without direction. You're being invited back into something already written, already waiting, already yours. And even now, if you close your eyes, you may feel it, that familiar pull. Not pressure, not guilt, just a holy reminder. You're not lost. You're located. Heaven knows exactly where you are, and exactly how to bring you back. So breathe. You don't need to perform. You only need to respond. The blueprint still stands, and your name is still on it. We ask ourselves so many questions when we're hurting. Am I still worthy? Did I mess this up too badly? Is God still willing to use someone like me? But those aren't the questions that move us forward. Those are the ones that keep us circling the past. They sound spiritual, but they're rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being too late, fear of still not being enough. But here's the shift. The real question isn't, am I worthy? It's, am I willing? Are you willing to trust again? Are you willing to move, even with trembling hands? Are you willing to walk forward, even if you can't yet see the outcome? Worthiness was never the requirement. Grace took care of that. But willingness, that's where healing breathes. That's where God meets you. You see, if we wait to feel perfectly ready, we'll never move. If we wait to be fully healed, we'll never lead. If we wait for our record to be spotless, we'll never speak. But God's pattern is always the same. He doesn't wait for us to clean up before calling us. He calls us and then begins the cleaning as we walk. He says, "Follow me," not "Fix yourself first." So today, let the weight of worthiness fall off your shoulders. You were never meant to carry it. Instead, ask the better question: am I willing to take one step, to return without knowing what comes next, to open your hands, even if they're still shaking? Because willingness opens the door. It unlocks something heaven has been waiting to release. And here's the beauty: God doesn't demand certainty, just surrender. You don't need a 5-year plan. You just need to say yes to the next step. So ask it quietly now: Lord, what are you inviting me to do? Then listen and move with what you hear, even if it's small, especially if it's small. This is where the path begins again, not with grand gestures, but with holy willingness. He's not asking if you're worthy. He already knows you are. He's asking, are you willing? We often imagine healing as a sudden moment, a rush of emotion, a lightning bolt of revelation, a spiritual breakthrough that changes everything in a day. But most of the time, healing comes more like sunrise than lightning. Gradual, gentle, step by step. God rarely heals by spectacle. He heals by invitation. Take up your mat and walk. Go and show yourself to the priest. Stretch out your hand. Simple commands, obedient responses, and through that obedience, restoration. Because healing isn't always about a feeling. It's about movement. It's about walking forward, even when the wound still aches. It's about trusting the process, even if you can't see the end. You may not feel whole yet. You may still carry grief, regret, or weariness. But if He's asking you to move even just one small step, that step is part of your healing. Maybe it's making that phone call. Maybe it's opening the Word again. Maybe it's writing down the dream you buried. Maybe it's forgiving yourself again. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be honest. Because when you obey, you create space for grace to meet you. And don't be surprised if healing doesn't feel like joy at first. Sometimes it feels like release. Sometimes it feels like letting go of something you thought you needed. Sometimes it feels like grief, followed by a strange peace that settles in after the tears. But with each obedient step, your soul begins to mend. Not through striving, but through trust. Not through perfection, but through presence. God is not watching for flawless execution. He's watching for surrendered direction. Will you move, even if it hurts? Will you trust, even if it's quiet? Will you obey, even if your emotions aren't fully on board? Because that's where healing lives. Not in the destination, but in the holy movement forward. Step by step, breath by breath, obedience over emotion. And soon, you'll realize you're not just walking. You're being restored. When the silence stretches long, you start to wonder if you've been forgotten. Or worse, if God stopped speaking altogether. But what if the silence wasn't absence, but adjustment? What if His voice didn't disappear? It just shifted to a frequency only humility can hear? There was a time when you felt the nearness of God often. In songs, in sermons, in quiet moments of prayer. And then it faded. And in that fading, you questioned everything. Was I ever really close to Him? Did I lose His favor? Is He done using me? But maybe the silence wasn't rejection. Maybe it was recalibration, a divine tuning. Just as a musician tightens the strings of an instrument to match the right pitch, sometimes heaven adjusts our ears, not to stop us from hearing, but to teach us to hear differently. When we walk through failure, our ears become attuned to a different kind of whisper. Less about instruction, more about intimacy. You stop chasing signs, and you start longing for presence. You stop waiting for thunder, and you start noticing the wind. Think of Elijah. After the fire, after the earthquake, after the wind, there came a still small voice. A whisper. Not because God was weaker, but because Elijah was finally quiet enough to receive it. That's what's happening now. You're not disconnected. You're becoming tuned. And when you hear him again, and you will, it won't sound like before. It won't be about doing. It'll be about being. It'll come with tenderness, with wisdom, with the kind of love that doesn't shout, it draws near. And here's the holy mystery. The more you walk in healing, the more clearly you'll hear him again. Not because you've earned it, but because your spirit has become still enough to recognize the whisper. So be at peace. His voice hasn't gone silent. It's just coming from closer than you thought. Perfection was never part of your assignment. We assumed it was. We thought leadership meant having all the answers, being unshakably strong, carrying everyone else without cracking. But that's not heaven's model. God doesn't build with untouchable people. He builds with surrendered ones. He doesn't use your strength to impress. He uses your weakness to connect. The world honors polished images. God honors pierced hearts. Because a heart that has been broken knows how to hold others gently. A voice that has trembled knows how to speak with compassion. A soul that has wrestled knows how to walk with the hurting, not above them. Your cracks were never disqualifiers. They were openings. Places where light can leak through, places where grace becomes visible. Look at Paul. He pleaded for the thorn to be removed. But God said, "My power is made perfect in weakness." Not in charisma, not in success, not in perfection. What if your most painful moment is now your greatest point of ministry? What if the very thing you tried to hide is the place where someone else will finally feel seen? You were never meant to lead with distance. You were meant to lead with empathy. Not from a pedestal, but from proximity, from the dirt, from the middle of the story, from the same road where others walk. This doesn't mean you glorify your pain. It means you don't hide from it anymore. You offer it. You surrender it. You let it become a testimony, not just a memory. Because the world doesn't need more flawless leaders. It needs healed ones, scarred ones, ones who've walked through fire and now carry a quiet flame of hope for others. And you, with your story, your ache, your redemption, are exactly the kind of leader heaven trusts. Not in spite of your imperfection, but because of it. You're not disqualified. You're equipped, and it's time to lead again differently. Pause for a moment. Let this sink in. You were never called because you performed well. You were called because He loved you first. Before you got it right, before you got it wrong, before the titles, before the silence, grace came first. This is the sacred synthesis, the holy clarity that shifts everything. You never earned the calling, so you can't unearn it. You were never chosen because of perfection. You were chosen through grace, by grace, for grace. All the striving, all the trying to prove you were enough, It was never needed. It was never what God asked for. He asked for your heart. He asked for your surrender, and He still does. That means you're free. Free from the voice that says, do more. Free from the weight of spiritual performance. Free from the false gospel of earning love. 8. You don't have to climb back into God's favor. You never left it. You don't have to wear spiritual masks. You're already known. You're already loved. Even now, especially now. Let that truth exhale in you. Let it clear the room. Because when grace becomes your foundation, everything shifts. You stop running. You start resting. You stop hiding. You begin healing. And what you offer to others from that place is no longer pressure, but peace. You lead differently. You love more gently. You walk with steady mercy, because you finally understand how deeply it carried you. Grace wasn't just the beginning, it's the middle, and it will be the end. You were never disqualified. You were being reintroduced to the source. And now, the pressure lifts, the striving ends, the spirit begins again. This is grace. This is your real foundation, and it has always been enough. Close your eyes if you can. Let everything quiet down just for a moment. No fixing, no striving, just stillness, just breath. You've carried enough. You've questioned enough. And still, you're here. Still drawn to the whisper. Still reaching, even if it's with trembling hands. Let's pray together, not to impress God, but to return to Him. Softly, honestly, as you are. God, I'm tired of running, tired of hiding behind the idea that I'm no longer worthy, tired of rehearsing the moments I got it wrong. I've confused your grace with performance, and I've let regret speak louder than your voice. But today, something in me shifts. I may not feel ready, but I'm willing. And that's enough for you. So I lay down every label that shame tried to place on me. I release the belief that I disqualified myself. I bring you my ache and my longing. Thank you for never looking away. Thank you for seeing me, even in the silence. For walking with me through the delay. For holding the blueprint, even when I forgot it existed. God, awaken what's been buried. Breathe on what I believed was dead. Not so I can prove myself, but so I can walk again in grace. I choose to trust your timing. I choose to move at your pace. And I choose to believe that if you're calling me now, you've already prepared the way. I'm not who I was, and that's the beauty of it. Use this healed version of me, the one who's been through fire and still chooses faith, the one who's no longer chasing perfection, but walking in purpose. This is my return, and I trust you to lead me. Amen. You don't need to rush out of this moment. Let it linger. Let grace settle over you like a blanket. And when you're ready, keep walking with us. Here at Calm, called, we create sacred space like this, week after week, for tired souls like yours. So when the next whisper of peace comes, you'll be ready to hear it. Subscribe now, and let's walk this unfolding together. You are not disqualified. This is where healing begins. And the path forward has already been prepared for you.